We promised each other that we would at least do 8 of these episodes. We are, of course, going to go as long as we live.
But the commitment was
8
episodes. We need to have a solid season 1.
Yeah.
Before we can throw in the towel.
Well, because we've heard of that, like, successful podcasts are podcasts that get to number 7.
Oh, I thought it was 8. Oh, so we just gotta...
No, we were like, then we're going to do 8.
There's no other way to go about it.
As long as you make 8.
If we make it to 8, we will succeed.
Today was fun. I got a good little preview lesson, a little mini lesson in microphone etiquette.
Oh, yeah. Which I'm betraying today with a stand, and I'm just holding the RE20 today.
If you're watching, we do have some interesting setups going on in here.
I'm sitting on a couch, you're sitting on a chair. That's like last episode.
Except we're in a totally different part of Brooklyn.
Once again, episode 4, 4th location. At this point, we should just commit.
Fort Greene. That's where I live.
Yeah, it's very
Find
green.
me.
Very green today.
Just kidding.
Very Fort, very green.
Don't find me.
Please don't look. But do go to Fort Greene Park, though. Very nice park.
Oh, it's such a nice park.
Very nice park. Extremely green. There is a fort, but it's mostly green.
Can confirm.
With an E at the end.
Oh my God, can I tell you? So I have a friend who's Italian. And he's going to...
Hi.
If he listens to this, this will ruin
No, you
my
actually have an
entire...
actual Italian friend,
Yes.
not the amalgamation that I am.
Yeah, he's from Italy.
Yeah.
This one's also from Italy, but ancestrally, not currently.
Not currently.
So the one that I know that's currently from Italy...
Yep.
His name is Mattia, and I hope he doesn't
Mattia.
listen to this episode.
I met Mattia once.
He was not learning English. He was very good at English when I met him, and he learns all the rules of how to pronounce things. So he read Fort Greene, which is Greene,
with an E at the end,
and assumed because green Green is green that this would be Greeny, Fort Greeny.
Fort Greeny.
And I thought it was such a intelligent.
It's too
assumption
intelligent. It was too intelligent of an assumption for the English language.
On his part that I did not correct him, and I will continue in his presence to call it Fort Greeny.
Mattia also had a very funny realization of what decaf was.
Oh my God. This was also very intelligent of him. So cafe in Italian means coffee. The English decaffeinated would
means
loosely,
to remove the caffeine.
Yes. In Italian, decaffeinated just sounds like coffee.
There's no coffee in it. It's water.
So he assumed that tea that does not have caffeine would be called deteinated. Perfectly logical assumption.
Again, too smart for the English language. We didn't think that far. You thought that far.
It's
almost like tarocchi.
Tarocchi.
It's almost like they know what they're doing, and we're kind of making it up as we go.
Tarocchi is a callback to episode 3, which, if you haven't listened to, introduces why we use tarot on the podcast.
Very good episode. We gave you a little creative consultation.
Mm-hmm. It was fun. Yes.
And I hope you've been taking some steps.
Actually.
Little tiny pieces.
Oh, if we want to talk about it. It crippled me.
Sure, yeah, go for it.
It crippled me for like a week.
Let's talk about it. Also, I'm going to say this at the top of the episode for folks listening on like YouTube and Apple Podcasts and stuff. Please like and review the podcast. It helps our numbers very much. Subscribe if you're listening on YouTube and like the video. Thank you very much, and we're going to get back. Okay, now continue.
So I got some hot takes from the tarot from Cole on the pod. And one of these was to iterate before I start a big project to get my ideas flowing, which is not my general practice. It sounds like a logical, reasonable thing to do, to make small things before you make the big thing.
Yep.
I have an enormous penis, so I like to tackle the big one first.
We made an analogy because Abby doesn't really know a lot of microphone etiquette, which, like, fair play. You're a visual artist. I work with these every day, so I would know the etiquette. The etiquette
amazing
is
analogy.
An SM58 needs to be held like a girthy cock.
You need to hold it toward the back of your throat.
Toward the back of your throat. When you use a microphone like this, like you're blowing a bubble, it's not really going to get that much. The listeners of the podcast, my voice is just cut out very suddenly and sounds very strange. You got to have it aimed toward the back of your throat, and you got to go. Oh!
So the advice is not blowing bubbles.
Sucking dick.
Yes, blowing. Period.
Jobs. Speaking of jobs, productivity.
Oh my gosh.
The point of this episode this week is the false nature of productivity, especially in America, which is where we know most of our shit because that's where we are.
Mm-hmm. I was going to say last week was sort of on the lighter side. I mean, we definitely introduced ourselves and our backstories, which are a mix
as
of
heavy as they may be.
dark and light.
Yeah.
But this episode is going to be more getting into the nitty gritty of creative living, productivity culture. We're going to talk about it.
Because as Practically Happy, as our podcast, a lot of our ethos for the pod is like, how does one go about making themselves happy and living a wife and being a good wife?
Practically Happy is about
now
being
a trad wife podcast. There's a lot of podcasts I listen to that are under like the headgum like label. And at the beginning of every podcast, there's a femme voice that goes, "This is a headgum podcast." And now I just love thinking of it like, this is a trad wife podcast. Dynamic banter listeners, perfect person listeners.
We are both kind of trad wives in some ways.
A little bit.
So we're both partnered.
We're both partnered, and
we both cook.
And we're both definitely the femme leaning in the relationship.
Yes. We talked about wife swapping the other day with our partners. So we are the wives, and
we are the wives
we
in
would
our
swap.
relationships. Yes.
So I would date his partner Nat, and he would date my partner David. And what would happen, we decided, was that I would gain an enormous amount of weight because your partner happens to make a delicious carrot cake.
No, she bakes it. The thing is, she bakes without a recipe. And if you've ever tried to bake without a recipe,
intuition bakes.
No, she looks at a recipe and be like, okay, those are like, that's vaguely the ingredients, not the proportions, the ingredients. And then closes her phone, picks up a bowl, and just goes for it.
She's like, eyes closed.
Jesus, take the wheel.
She Jesuses take the wheels, her carrot cake, and it's fabulous.
And it was great.
And we decided that for our wife swap, if you were to be with David, that an album would almost certainly happen.
Oh yeah, you and Nat would end up just like disappearing into the woods and just doing a lot of yoga.
Yeah, eating carrot cake.
Me and David would end up
producing,
having like a rave venue. I would totally just be gassing David up the entire time and just like, no, you're doing it.
Both reckless Geminis.
very reckless behavior. Very reckless, but very pointed toward passions.
Yes. Well,
passionate recklessness is
David,
what my brand is. It would work too well.
We should do this actually. I want to do yoga in the forest, and you should produce more music.
Look, my end goal is have the Faraday cage, my practice, exist in the woods somewhere in a cabin.
Oh, that would be so cool. So people can like escape.
Yeah, so you go. It's like a retreat. Like Rick Rubin has their whole like Shangri-La is I think what Rick Rubin calls it.
Does he call it Shangri-La?
Yeah.
That's so Rick.
I think so.
That's so Rick, as if I know him.
That's so Rick. It is so Rick though. Where artists will just kind of escape and make their record. I am not a efficient engineer. I'm an effective engineer, and that is rejecting productivity. I am
Which is the topic of
this episode. We should just get into the actual topic of the episode. It's going to be a lot of information. It's going to be a lot of what productivity has become, and what needs to change about it in our society so people can actually pursue happiness and pursue
feel
themselves.
Like they're allowed.
Yeah. And thus, I will hand it off to you, the Baron of Research of this pod.
We called this podcast Practically Happy.
We did.
And it's a creative living podcast.
Yeah.
So I thought a great question to start today's topic off is, why is creative living seen as impractical?
Is it because it's not seen as very productive? Is it because it's not seen as contributing to society in a financial sense? I was about to say as a whole.
Yeah, well,
but it doesn't.
Very caught up in money. So I think the like gut reaction to this question would just be because it doesn't make money.
It doesn't affect the bottom line. It doesn't raise GDP.
Well, but it doesn't make money for you personally. I think that would be the gut reaction. No, I'm serious.
Yeah, no, that is the biggest critique. I think a lot of like, at least definitely my family warned me this when I went into the arts of just
everyone who's ever tried to study art.
How you gonna make money? It's just like, I'm not doing this because I'm going to make money. I'm doing this because I wanted to do it.
That's a good response. However, I'm going to make a different argument.
It's fair.
Yes, we need to earn to survive. So I get the response, how are you going to earn with this?
Yeah.
But it's a little silly when you look at what you can earn as a creative.
Oh, absolutely. It's also silly when you realize like how crucial the arts are in society. Like people want to consume things. People want to consume
Well,
art.
think of your favorite artists.
Yeah.
Think of the people that you love to consume.
Yeah.
Whether it's music, YouTube, I don't know.
No, like as a person in like the music space, and anytime I'm just like, does anyone actually care about what I do? Go on my phone. Oh, the entire world's talking about this one thing that happened in the music space. Oh no. My industry's definitely needed in society, or at least desired in society.
Do you think our favorite artists are doing all right? Financially?
Oh, well, the people that we look up to
people-
tend to be because they have that platform and they've
Right. The
worked on it,
mainstream
so- yeah.
artists that people could be in love with, whether they're in a museum or in a fancy New York gallery, or we're
or
listening to them,
algorithmically given to you by Spotify.
or YouTube or whatever.
Yeah.
Do you think they're doing well?
Yeah, they usually are doing pretty well.
Okay, so the argument that you don't earn as a creative is silly.
Is false. It's a false notion.
So then, is it that it's uncertain?
That's a given.
Right.
Just like your
But
ability to
why-
be productive is uncertain, why would that not then reflect on the more like holistic things that you can do as a person, like pursue art or create art?
My argument here is that art is put in a very special impractical category because there are so many things that you can do to earn money that are uncertain in outcome.
Yes.
Opening a business, investing in the stock market. These things are not really seen by our society as impractical.
When you open up a small business, you account for the time you will be in the red. Because you will be in the red for a very long time relative to like what one might assume of like
On
a more
average.
practical career path. You will be in the red for a bit. Why is that not respected within the art field?
And this goes for career paths that have a strong internship culture where you don't make money. This goes for like med students and that have
Talking to
do-
you, electric lady.
My point is that there are so many career paths that are uncertain in outcome in terms of what you will earn.
Yeah.
And yet most of them are seen as more practical than a career in the arts.
Yeah.
Which is the same thing. It's just uncertain in outcome as to how much you will earn from your creative pursuit.
Yeah.
In my opinion, the reason why art is put in this special impractical category by our society is because of productivity culture. And I'm going to give you a good definition of productivity culture. It's what makes unemployed people depressed
Yes.
and differently abled people as well. And it's the pervasive attitude and internalized value that permeates the ethos of work in organizations and nations. I have another good kind of definition here. The false belief that we need to be working all the time to be our most productive selves.
Well, that is what productivity is.
right.
I talked to you briefly about
In our culture,
Yeah.
in our society, that's not
Oh, yeah.
necessarily what is most productive.
No, I'm not even talking about like what is most productive. Productivity in itself is the ability to just keep working.
Mm-hmm.
It's not efficiency. Productivity and efficiency are two drastically
That's a
different
good
things.
point.
Productivity is the ability to work. Efficiency is the ability to work well. The solution to how do you work better is cutting the fat that productivity creates just to make you keep working.
It's a really good point.
No bloated way of working, no productive way of working is efficient. You're not focused. You're not effective. Effective work is not productive work.
So obviously this is a topic that we're quite passionate about.
So yeah, I've always called myself as an engineer. I'm not an efficient engineer. I like to take my time on things. I like
Yeah,
to get
you
things
do.
right. I like to put my heart and soul into what I'm hearing is what I'm feeling. I like to take that time.
Mhm.
If I was being productive, I would set shit up, press record, and just be like, yeah, I'll fix it later.
You will solve the problem instead of creating
More problems down the line.
the
Yes.
product.
It's effective.
Right.
So without further ado,
Yeah.
as cars pass
I wanted-
outside,
I
let's
wanted
get into
to
it.
Get into sort of the history and culture of productivity. So
Yeah.
like where did it come from? How did it get so ingrained?
Where did it go? Where did it come from?
Cotton Eye
Productive
Joe.
Joe.
Because I think it pertains it not only pertains, it hinders creatives from starting and from producing.
Yeah.
So I want to get into how this happened and how we got here.
But while it's in my head right now, like as you said that, getting on a treadmill and like raising the speed to the point where you're like able to keep pace, you can do that for a while. Imagine looking at a treadmill going 10 miles an hour and just be like, because you know the second you get on, you can't stop. Because if you stop, you're getting thrown into the fucking back wall. If I start creating, I can't stop. Because if I stop, I'm not being productive. The second I stop, I've failed. That's my treadmill theory.
Yeah, I like your analogies. They're fun. So we can talk a lot about how this is a core value in the U.S. Americans love to be first.
And we rarely are first, but we love saying that we were first.
You know, swimming. Like I've heard that we're good at that.
Like a YouTube commenter, we love being first.
Please like and subscribe.
Please like and subscribe. Comment on the video. Do comment first if you are first, actually. It does help the algorithm as much as it's such a weird thing to do.
So I want to get into how it started in the U.S.
Please do.
Because productivity actually as a word didn't start being used in our vocabulary until the 17th century. But I think this was a huge thing beforehand. So I want to get into the research of it since the dawn of our nation, but what I want to start with is sort of my own theory. So this was ingrained into the fiber of our beings. I would argue since the AC was an era. Because where do you think
air conditioning?
Did you know that air conditioning was created for printmaking?
Really?
Yeah, because paper changes
Not
size.
for human beings?
No.
Oh my god.
Paper changes size when it's because it's a material. It's like
all materials like
wood
expand and contract.
Right. And
anyone who's ever owned a guitar knows that if you live in a building that just like fucking shit goes out of tune.
You can't register your art. So in printmaking, you need your piece of paper to stay in the same spot, basically, so that if you're doing multiple layers, they line up. Does that make sense?
Yep.
If your paper is going to change size from one day to the next, or even from a few hours to the next,
you're fucked.
Then you can't make multi-layer prints. So the solution...
So the solution was condition that space.
Yes.
How long before then was like...
We were just hot. It was fine.
We were just really hot. We didn't care.
And then we were like, no, paper can't shrink that much. That's unacceptable.
But people can shrink that much. And it's still not a commodity in most apartment buildings in New York.
What is really hilarious is that I worked in a silkscreen printing studio that had no air conditioning. This is how I learned this, actually, because people would talk about all the time how they needed this.
I never knew that. Oh, no wonder
we were just so hot.
Yeah, I was about to say, no wonder you... Do they at least have, like, air ventilation?
Poor air ventilation,
so that's why you just seemed high all
the time. We got so lit.
Inhaling fumes.
But the printers would
That was an
complain
interesting era for you.
all the time about how the paper was changing sizes. And they would talk about how, did you know that air conditioning was actually created so that this doesn't happen and we don't have air conditioning? That was the conclusion about printmaking, was that work was more important.
The paper's more important than you passing out because of heat stroke.
Which ties nicely back into our talk about productivity and the American culture of the workplace. So my theory, going back to my theory.
Yes.
The sin of idleness.
Ooh.
Where do you think that came from?
I mean...
Do you think that came from God? Do you think God doesn't like resting?
He made
a whole day. If that's your belief system, he made a whole ass day for resting.
He dedicated an entire day to chilling the fuck out.
My theory would be that the sin of idle hands was a very convenient thing to instill in your subjects for places like the church and state.
Yep.
And the wealthy.
Who, as much as we base our country upon, like, the separation of church and state, it's never really been separate.
If this was already an ideology, but it was handed down through the church, through things like sin, then America, as a place that's hypothetically separated between church and state, needed to come up with a whole different ideology to get people to do the same thing, to be lazy. Anyway, the belief that you'll go to hell if you don't produce as quickly and effectively as possible for your whole life was created by the powers that have been, and it has been here for a long time.
By the bean. Chicago's bean
by the
spoke
bean?
one day. It was just like, do not stop.
Honestly, if the
This
Chicago
in
bean
vital
spoke, I would
hands.
listen to anything it said.
Really?
It's such a good sculpture.
It's a bean.
I love it.
It's a big,
you seen
shiny
the bean?
Yes, I've seen the bean.
Bean makes me so happy.
The bean makes me angry.
Let's go see the bean together and do a podcast.
Let's do a podcast by the bean.
It's an art critique podcast. I'll tell you about how the bean makes me happy.
That actually would be such a funny episode.
Uh-huh.
Do comment if that's something you would want to see.
Bean or no bean?
Bean or no bean?
You can use the emoji.
Bean
Is there
or no
a bean emoji?
I have to assume there's a bean emoji.
Edamame, if it doesn't.
Bean review. Bean review. Bean review.
Actually, this is bean. Where do I have bean? I do
You have bean? Is that an edamame?
This is bean.
That's a turtle.
It was, but does it look, think about a turtle anatomically. Does it look more
It doesn't have legs.
like an edamame or a
It's
turtle?
more of an edamame than a turtle.
That's why I have named this bean.
Listeners of the podcast, it's just a green circle with a shell on it. There's no arms. There's no legs.
This is my
There's
only,
no bottom part of the shell. You can see its stomach.
This is my only stuffed
It's a bean.
animal won at a game at Coney Island. And
You won something at Coney Island.
it's very special to me.
You beat the odds.
It only cost me like $10 to win the game.
Yeah, there we go.
1776.
Ooh, the birth of a nation.
Some fancy gentleman, also known as a founding father of sorts.
Benjamin.
No. I'm talking
not
about
Benjamin.
I'm talking about Adam Smith.
Oh, fuck.
He wrote that classic economics text, The Wealth of Nations.
Yes. I've never read it, but
this was sort of the first, maybe not first, but this was what codified productivity as a core American value.
Yeah.
Now we get into when productivity is actually spoken about in U.S. culture. And that Benjamin character, you were about to mention, he actually is credited with supposedly writing the first to-do list.
Oh, Ben. Ben, no.
No, I mean, it had its use at the time, I'm sure.
It has its uses now. I use to-do lists.
Just because
But
just because our argument is that productivity culture has become toxic doesn't
mean being
people had
productive
bad
in your own
intentions.
forms. Yeah. Being productive is good. Like having things to do and the ability to do them is still a virtue.
Or is that your ingrained American ideological brain talking?
I'm so sorry, listeners.
Spurred by the advances of the Industrial Revolution, this value became more of an obsession.
We still almost pride ourselves very toxically on being productive as a nation.
Right.
To this day.
So unsurprisingly, productivity became, and still is, inexorably linked to virtue.
I'm shocked.
But being productive as an equivalent of virtuous left us in a little bit of a dangerous spot.
It's so crazy.
And I'll give you a good example of that. There started to be these early efficiency experts who became famous for determining the most efficient way to do any given task. And an example of this is actually Peter Frank and Lillian Gilbreth from Cheaper by the Dozen. Frank was famous for saying that postpartum bed rest was a waste of time.
Of course, a man said that. Because only a man would say that.
But you can see how this obsession with productivity got so ingrained in our culture that this sort of thing started to happen. Actually, there's another good example in
That's
the
like
late
early manosphere shit.
Another good example is in the late 18th and early 19th century. There were things called etiquette manuals, and these were like popular magazine stuff, basically. They suggested that daily and hourly planners were the best means of self-improvement.
Just like plan out everything you're doing at every minute of every day.
Not to say that a daily planner is a bad thing.
Journals are great, and planners should be part of your journal. Some loose sort of planning. But an hourly day planner?
Also, tying it to self-worth is really the issue that I'm getting at here. Basically, if you don't have something to do and you're not
for every hour
if you're
of every
resting,
day.
Like you're
worthless. You chump.
Ouch.
Again, going back to my whole treadmill analogy, imagine looking at a treadmill going fast and being like, I gotta jump on that, and if I ever fall, I'm gonna splat against the back wall.
And plenty of people do splat against the back wall. That's what we're calling burnout.
It's almost like the splat against the back wall is burnout. That is what burnout is people cannot keep up that pace. People aren't designed to keep up that pace. There's a note you have for this podcast about the way that productivity slowly progresses. And it made a massive leap in the age of when computers were made available to the Oh, it went down. Oh, I thought it went up. Oh, I'm going to redact that in slightly. But just because we have the capacity to do more doesn't mean we are actually like designed as people to do more.
Either the reason, and I'll get to this.
Yeah.
But the reason for the decline in productivity culture in very recent years is either A, because we exhausted it, or B, because people are realizing that it doesn't serve them.
¿Por qué no los dos?
¿Por qué no los dos? You know what I want to do, actually?
What?
When I first mention productivity culture, or when you do,
yeah,
can you put like a dun dun dun?
Can you record one right now?
Dun dun dun.
Wait, can we actually both at the same time?
Yeah. Dun dun dun.
All right, we're good.
That's good. So is productivity culture a coercive ploy or a covert contract implemented by the American government since its inception to bind us into servitude to the state? Or is it the vestiges of God-fearing societies that we must
unindoctrinate, disassemble,
that
dismantle?
We must disassemble and unindoctrinate ourselves from?
The answer is yes.
It doesn't matter.
It is a completely rhetorical question. How the fuck did we get here?
Well, hopefully we have a better idea now of how.
Which we do. Generally, the general person has a better idea of how we got in here and have realized how indoctrinated it has become that you must be productive in order to have a sense of self-worth.
So if you have ever felt like shit because of a day where you didn't accomplish as much, this is what we're talking about, by the way.
I should have had a day yesterday where all I did was play Stardew Valley, and guess what? I am thriving today because of it.
I'm so happy for you. This man has unindoctrinated himself. I did want to talk a little bit, like fasting way forward to like Now Times, because there's some really interesting research from Now Times. Big Now Times. Overall productivity growth slowed between 1970 and 1990, and again since the year 2000. So now.
What I took from that, as I said before, was the Y2K era saw a spike. Right?
There might have been a spike. I don't know what happened then.
Because suddenly you were given these tools where you can potentially do more.
Right.
But again, just because you had that doesn't mean we still have the capacity as people to conduct our society at that level of productivity. We immediately burned that out and saw it continue to decline afterwards.
Well, this trend in society of people, whatever you want to call it, quiet quitting and prioritizing other areas of their life.
Quiet quitting is nothing but like taking care of yourself.
Yeah.
And like only doing what you're being compensated for so you can preserve yourself to do the things that actually give you a sense of self-worth.
From our perspective, but from the perspective of...
I know from the perspective of the people giving us money, it's just like...
No. From the perspective of those indoctrinated into the Protestant work ethic.
Oh, it's lazy.
It looks like quiet quitting.
Yeah. Well,
to us, it's just self-care, like you're saying.
Yeah.
But I that's exactly what I was going to say. This trend in society speaks to the fact that people are waking up to this notion that maybe what's best for the economy isn't what's best for them. And in fact, in recent years, studies have shown that a given nation's economic prosperity doesn't have the same connection to overall well-being or even median income as it used to. And that's from a book by Karen Foster. It's called Productivity and Prosperity. In this book, she basically proves that economic growth has no equivalence to quality of life.
And now, as the tensions get higher and higher, we're starting to realize, oh shit, we're actually like falling apart because of it. Because of these old decrepit systems that needed to be dismantled well before now, but we're just getting to it now.
We are, and I love to see that people are doing it. This podcast needed to exist because it's still not mainstream to choose yourself and your life above servitude.
Yeah.
to the state or to
And
the
there-
GDP of your
There's a
nation.
degree that the only people who do make that choice and actually receive mainstream like attention are those that kind of go off the deep end in the other direction, like van life influencers who are just like, I'm going completely off the grid.
I want to be a van life influencer
Which
when I
like
grow
is
up.
like honestly good on you. But like the average person that is choosing to like be happy and be themselves is just like a fucking artist who's just choosing to do something that makes them happy and gives them self-worth. And that means like in the eyes of the more productive America, the productive systems is just laziness, not wanting to work. The children yearn for the mines. I yearn for the mines. But these mines, there's so many dead canaries in these mines.
We here at Practically Happy want you to find what makes you happy and do it. So this is all to say that if you've ever felt bad trying to do that, there is a history and a value system that is making you feel that way. There's really good reasons for feeling that way. It's baked into your culture. And even if you are the kind of person that's deviant or like more comfortable with nonconformity to societal things, this causes depression. Like this causes serious issues. And we're going to get into how this has affected us as creators.
Can I actually get into that?
Sure.
Yeah, those who are more on like the deviant side of the spectrum, you're indoctrinated with this idea that like productivity equals self-worth. I, as an adult, was diagnosed with autism. And realistically, it's something that I now, in hindsight, know I always was struggling with. You learn to mask and hide your own symptoms by studying other people and how other people are. And when all you see is people being productive, that wears on you so much. As far as I see someone else having the ability to do something else that I can't do, I'm going to burn myself out trying to do that, even though I am not even close to being predisposed to being able to do that.
Well, you also just see the value system.
Yeah, there's the value system. It's like, oh, if I'm going to be worth it, and if I'm going to be a person capable of giving back to society, you must be able to be worthwhile. You must be able to do something and do it well in order to be worthwhile. And you can't not be doing it, because if you're not doing it, you're not getting better at it. And that is the form of productivity that, as an autistic person, I have masked almost to the point where even now deconstructing that concept, I can't remove myself from it. It's something that I'm still working on, like trying to get healthier about. But realistically, I've based my entire person on the fact that like I do something and I do it well.
I think as relatable as a thing can be to a neurotypical person,
Yeah.
I
But
feel you.
I'm saying that purely from my own perspective. I know that there is a million neurotypical folk out there who have experienced the same thing in their own ways.
No, but from that framework, it makes a ton of sense.
Yeah.
That you being able to mimic this culture just to fit in. Yeah, that
to
makes
make
sense.
up for deficiencies that you feel in yourself.
Coping mechanisms.
Coping mechanisms. Woo!
Learn them on the podcast. To wrap things in a neat bow, I think productivity hinders creativity specifically in two ways.
All right.
So the first way is you don't start.
It's terrifying to look at that treadmill going and say, if I'm going to get on that, I better not splat against the back wall. Better not burn out.
You don't see how pursuing your passion will help the nation's economic engine. And even if that's not your biggest concern, it's ingrained in our society, again, that you must contribute.
And realistically,
produce.
even if that's not what you're thinking about, if you are within a financially backed system, capitalism, very much a financially backed system, it's based on capital. Like you're going to experience the red, you're going to experience not making capital, and the system itself will attack you. There's a lot of means of, even if you aren't in your own way, the system is in your own way. And you have to find means of overcoming that. So there, you do have to play the game to some extent. But you can't let, it's so hard to even say this, but like you can't let that get in the way of your self-worth, even though you won't even be able to live sometimes if that's truly what you want to do and it doesn't support you. It's really fucking difficult. And it's really cyclical at the moment.
But it's like we were saying before, just because creative living is not seen as practical, it's not necessarily more impractical than something that society would deem more practical because they can see how it contributes better. You know what I'm saying?
To relate it, I'm relating a lot of your research to my own shit. It just feels like it's working at the moment. Like with the Faraday cage, my studio practice, I want to make the Faraday cage exist as a physical place for people to come into and experience creating from their like deeper self. Do you know how much harder it is to tell that to an investor instead of, yeah, I'm just going to open a restaurant and I'm going to make food and people are going to eat the food and I'm going to make very small margins, but at least people have done it before.
Right. I have another good example. So I make art that's all about embodiment, and I started making yoga products like yoga mats.
Oh God.
Right?
Yeah.
No, and this is when people in my life that were so well-meaning got really excited because they could see a product that you could buy, and they were like, "Oh, so you're gonna make products
that I can
contribute
purchase to another space that already exists."
They don't sell better than my art does.
Yeah.
They don't end up producing me any more income than people who are actually interested in buying the art. It's just that art is in this very special category that's viewed as impractical. So my gains when it comes to art sales are not viewed as sustainable as something like if I was to develop a clothing line. Or,
I mean, that goes down to like in my industry, just like the whole streaming payout thing. Like a stream will get you not even a penny. It'll get you like 0.003 cents. It is one of the most consumed. It is the most consumed art form.
Yes.
Music.
Yes.
And yet it is so poorly compensated for to the point where artists that you love and that make your quality of life better don't get paid and cannot be sustained, and then have to sometimes quit, take time off, not be productive in the ways that they want to be productive because it does not give back to them. It is the value proposition. And there is such an ingrained lack of value to the pursuit of art versus the consumption of art.
Yes.
People will gladly pay 1 million different streaming services a month just to have each of these bits of content.
That's how capitalism is ruining every industry. The game now is like be a corporation that eats up other corporations instead of be a corporation that produces anything of value. But anyway.
Anyways, that's for maybe another episode.
I want to get to the second reason why I think this is such an important topic for creatives to think about and to evaluate in their own lives.
Yep.
Maybe even more important, because if you're already an artist and a creative, it's this, and you've made that decision and somehow gotten over the stigma.
Congrats. By the way.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for being here.
That's crazy.
You still have a problem because creativity does not work like maybe other forms of work. If you feel like you have to work all the time, then you're not giving yourself the space you need to create. If you're an artist that's just like, I'm going to sit down and for 6 hours just make something, maybe that's a good exercise, but that's not what you need to make a final product. Anyone who's ever had a big creative product to finish knows the ideas come with time and with space, and you have to give yourself that time and space. And productivity culture does not tell you that that's allowed.
Like to use the treadmill analogy, and I know there's actually a study to be brought up about all this, but to use the treadmill analogy, imagine how much further you could run on that treadmill if you just were able to sometimes take a break and step off and then get back on and step off, get back on. Maybe this time do it a little faster. This time do it a little slower and more meditated and focus on how you're doing it versus just doing it fast. Something that is just moving for the sake of moving is not efficient. Is not effective. It's just productive.
Yeah, there is a good study for this one.
Yeah.
It's a lot of people have heard of it at this point because it's
which
a big.
We might have taken it more for granted coming from a school that had an architecture portion of it.
Yeah, it's a big one for creativity in general. They gave a group of architects a few weeks to get something designed, and the people who started right away, drafting and sketching and solving the problem, ended up coming up with the worst designs, the ideas that were not rated very well.
Almost overthought.
The people who sat there and doodled and then by the time it was due, rushed something together, came up with the best ideas because they let it sit and they let it wait.
I thought, not even an analogy, but just a parallel. And it's so stupid given how deep a lot of our other stuff has been. But like, if you're going to cook a piece of fish, you marinate the fish. You give it some time to sit.
Marinate
and
your fish,
soak
people.
up its ideas. Marinate your fish. Yo, like a teriyaki salmon, you let that shit sit
so
for a day.
hungry right now. Do not.
No, but like if you just get the thing and just start making the thing, you're getting rid of like the way, if I'm going to use cooking, you're not developing flavors. You're just making a meal.
Mm-hmm.
What the fuck's the meal? With the architect's dilemma, those architects had so much time to like even pick apart their own ideas before they even put it down. And even if they wrote it down, they'd come back to it later just like, nah, that one doesn't work that well. Yada, yada, yada. If you're already sketching something, you're already in the mindset of just like, this is what I'm designing and I'm going to follow it through and see it to the end. When you have time, you are inherently, as a human being, going through, like, as much as min-maxing. You're aware of what min-maxing is.
I don't know what min-maxing is.
Natalia, my partner, also didn't know what it was, and that's crazy to me. And that pointed out how much I've masked productivity in my life. Min-maxing in business is the concept of how do I put in the minimal amount of effort for the maximum amount of output.
Okay.
It's productivity.
Yeah.
It's productivity. How
what we all did in school.
Yeah, exactly.
To get through tests.
How can I min-max this test? As human beings, I don't even think it's necessarily out of our nature to min-max our own ideas. And I don't think calling it min-maxing is a bad idea. It's when it's then like bastardized and abused, it becomes a bad thing. Because if I'm just to sit here and just stare at a wall and just think, I'm going to let so many ideas pass until a good one comes into my head and I know, oh, that one's good. That one's good. But I've still waded through so much shit to get to a good idea. If I was to do the first thing that came to my head, I could work 3 times as long and I would still be polishing a fucking turd.
I had a dream recently where a being, an entity.
I thought you said a bean.
A bean.
A bean.
Like this bean.
Little edamame turtle.
Was floating with me in space.
Very cool.
And showing me how time works.
Oh, shit. Oh, that's good.
I have zero background in physics or metaphysics or whatever the fuck that would be.
Did you look up shit after you woke up to see if anything was accurate?
Quantum whatever. Yes.
And it was?
I don't know, like, because I can't remember the details of the dream.
Oh, no.
But I know that it was like the entity was.
What was the entity? Can you describe the entity?
I couldn't see them because they were like here. They described time and they showed me what it looks like as like currents. And some currents are moving faster and moving slower. But since they all kind of loop around, you could be in 2 different times at once. And like, I don't have a background in that. I don't know what that means.
That is literally like,
that's like such a
that's relativity.
Dream.
That's quantum mechanics. Where the fuck were you pulling that shit from? You were channeling some shit.
The recesses of my mind.
Yeah, you were channeling some shit there for sure.
Also, time is pink, by the way.
Oh, that doesn't surprise me at all.
Like fuchsia.
Anyways, that had nothing to do with the podcast.
I had a dream. It was about time.
It was about time.
We got through it.
We got through it.
I hope you're feeling okay, because it's a lot to like admit and realize how this has affected your life. I know for me personally, since I left the 9-to-5 world, which was so comfortable. And
I can't relate.
Depressed.
I can't relate.
It was so comfortable. I mean, I knew I wasn't doing what I wanted to do with my life, but somehow I was able to tamp that down just to feel like I was a part of the thing I was supposed to be a part of.
I am the GDP.
I am the GDP.
You were born in the GDP. I was molded by it.
Yeah, since leaving that, it's the hardest thing has been the psychological impact of like, where do I fit? And is it okay for me to rest when I'm not producing, when I'm not being productive?
Which, when you say it out loud, it seems like such a stupid question.
Yeah. But it's like the main concern of my mental health during this period of my time is how to not get depressed in the face of not contributing in the way I know I'm supposed to.
Yeah. You want to read some tarot?
Yeah, let's read some tarot.
So
Fabulous.
this is also like the best lit podcast we've had yet.
What can I
In
say
this-
with my
in-
east-facing apartment?
Is that what
Nope.
that mean?
Nope. It's west-facing.
People are going to start to
I
pinpoint
think.
your apartment now. Maybe you should stop.
Yes. Yes, I should.
We're going to stop that bit right there. We're getting to the tarot portion. And I don't necessarily have a question for this podcast. Of course, it's going to focus on like the productive model that we exist in and how we're trying to break that with the podcast. But for a little backstory into my own life, we had an art show recently. 2 days. You weren't there for the second day, but on the second day, there is a lovely angel of a person, Mel.
Mel, who we should
You've gotten
definitely-
readings from before.
We will add her at somewhere. We
At
will
some point,
make
I'd love
sure
to get her
add
on the podcast, to be completely
Oh,
honest.
that would be fabulous.
That would be fucking phenomenal. This bitch is crazy.
She's very
and she's
intuitive.
gotten crazier. The last time we got a reading, it was enough to make your partner turn into a DJ.
She has made some significant changes in our lives for the better.
Yeah, no, it's always for the better, but it's always just up front. It's what it is. And she's gotten crazier, like full clairvoyance shit. And part of her reading for me on the second day of that art show was just being more intuitive with myself, listening to myself. I straight up sat down and the first words out of her mouth were, "You've intellectually been doing yourself a disservice by not just listening more, by not just doing daily readings, by not pursuing my things without the doubt of me being able to do them."
Right. Yeah, because I think from an outside perspective, I think Cole does have this intuitive thing that would allow you to divine meaning from something as simple as the tarot key.
The tarot key. But internally, I'm a self-doubting piece of garbage.
Which, we'll talk about that next episode.
That'll be a next episode.
That'll be the
thing.
next episode.
Yeah. But so today, we're not necessarily going to have a concrete topic that we're going into. We're going to read, and then we're going to see what comes out of it. So I'm going to splay out these cards. I'm going to get into, I've already had my signifier fly out
Oh,
as I was shuffling
I didn't even
before.
notice.
And I put it down on the table. You can't see it on the podcast, but I've already put down my signifier. I haven't turned it over yet. And I won't.
Surprise.
It'll be a surprise for both you and me.
Can you get this out of the way sometime?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Like a cat. Like, get the fuck out of the way. All right. So here we're going to flip them over now. And I'm going to announce them as they come. My signifier card that came out while I was shuffling, before we even started recording, and we had a whole conversation that it was just on the table,
I need to pay attention more.
is the 7 of Cups.
Seven
reversed.
of Cups.
7 of Cups reversed.
Okay.
The 7 of Cups speaks to abundance, but sometimes the inability to do something because of abundance.
Yeah!
Ooh!
We're already getting into it.
That's my signifier. We have the Devil upright.
Uh-oh.
We have the 5 of Pentacles reversed. And we have the King of Swords upright.
This is a spicy reading.
And our groundhog being the 8 of Wands. The 8 of Wands? The 8 of Wands.
I don't know much
reversed.
about the tarot, but from what I have experienced, this is going to be pretty spicy.
This is staying up now. No, this is staying up. The listeners of the pod, the angle has changed because I didn't know the table all this shit was on could change.
The table does change heights.
Everything's different now. Everything's new. I'm not done divining, but I wanted to announce on the podcast that the angle of the podcast has changed and this table is magic.
Much like the tarot. This table.
I've got some post-it notes.
You've got some post-it notes.
I've got some post-it notes. As per Mel's suggestion, thank you, Mel. We'd love to have you on the pod one day. As per Mel's suggestion, I need to be a little more intuitive about what these things mean. But I like to have the references there. Regardless, you asked me at one...
Has she watched the pod?
Yeah. You watched some episodes of the pod.
This is me fangirling.
Which made me immediately very conscious about my own readings on the pod.
I'm
just
so sorry. She's a master tarot puller.
What do you think? What do you think? What do you think?
You know, actually, she gave me advice that I used today.
Yeah.
which
all right.
was cleanse your space before and after any ceremonies. And I
Yeah.
considered this a
This
ceremony.
is a ceremony. The podcast is a ceremony. Oh, how lovely.
So I cleansed my space
Oh, very lovely.
using burning
Using burning. Palo Santo?
and sage, both.
Palo Santo and sage. I smelled the Palo Santo immediately.
Yeah, Palo Santo's great.
Electric Lady, big studio in New York.
Oh, I'm sorry that disturbed you. Did the smell disturb you?
It is the smell of Electric Lady as Palo Santo. Essentially.
Ugh, why did they have to ruin that for you? It was such a nice
No,
smell.
they didn't ruin it for me. Absolutely didn't ruin it.
Oh, good.
So the Seven of Cups, which is my signifier, reversed. The Seven of Cups speaks a lot to dreams and the bountifulness of dreams. This can relate somewhat to the architect's dilemma.
Okay.
Letting dreams pile up to the point where you're almost overwhelmed by them. And this maybe even goes toward the treadmill analogy more than the architect's dilemma. Of you see so many options, so much potential, and because there's so much that can be done, you hesitate doing anything at all and just keep things inside your head because if you don't touch them, they don't fight you back. However, reversed is making something of dreams. Reversed is taking those things into account, realizing that even though it might not be pinpoint what you want to do with those dreams, doing something is better regardless, and something will come off of action rather than just viewing dreams as I have a good idea and that's where it ends.
And that was the signifier for today.
Yeah.
That's a
And
good signifier.
It doesn't
for today.
mean rejecting those things. It doesn't mean rejecting the good that comes from dreams and ideas. But it does come from accepting that at some point you must do something with them for them to make any impact on yourself, any impact on your
Absolutely.
society. You have to do something with your ideas.
Fucking do it.
So, as I've said before on the podcast, the devil has a lot of sexual ties to it.
Maybe it's talking about our microphone analogy.
We're talking about our microphones. The fact that you have to treat an SM58 more like a gripped penis.
Gripped penis.
Gripped penis, gripped penis. To the tune of Girl Dinner. On a wider sense, it symbolizes the life energy locked up in the dark, hidden areas of self, which could not be entered by ordinary means. It is called the devil because for those who are not prepared to receive this energy, it can manifest itself as monsters, a sense of the universe as filled with evil, or even the temptation to indulge in violence. Which I see this immediately as we talked about before on the podcast, how indoctrinated into the productive system. That a lot of people are from birth.
This is more an analogy of the state of the world currently, perhaps.
Yes. You do have to be aware that the system you work in doesn't work for you.
Yeah.
And isn't working for itself in a lot of ways.
Regardless of whether you choose creativity or not.
Yes. To break a chain, you have to first know that there's a chain at all.
That is what this podcast was about.
Yeah. And the devil speaks to that. If we're talking about doing something with your ideas, the first action to take is accept the fact that you need to question if the system you're currently working under and put a lot of your self-worth into, is it working for you?
Beneficial to quality of life.
Yeah.
Specifically.
No, I'm saying to you as your person.
Yeah.
Is it helping you? So, well, ours is reversed. The Five of Pentacles is upright. It is a doorless church. Your means of betterment, your means of at the time that the Tarochi existed, at the time tarot was conceived, the church ruled most things, to be quite honest. So a doorless church would bring to mind a lot of helplessness, but a forcing of yourself to help yourself, the forcing of yourself to find your own means, your own gods.
Is that upright or reverse?
It's upright.
Okay.
Reverse, and here's the reverse meaning directly from 78 Degrees of Wisdom by Rachel Pollack. Weight gives the meaning chaos, disorder, ruin, and confusion. This suggests that the situation right side up has collapsed. The people are no longer surviving. While the immediate situation may seem much worse, it can sometimes lead to improvement. When people accustom themselves to suffering, a collapse may release them.
When people accustom themselves to suffering, a collapse may release them.
So to attach this to the devil, if we are to say this productive system, this doorless church, which is no longer helping you, your way of helping yourself is by breaking that chain, is by exiting, is by turning away and being like, my goal isn't to enter there anymore. My savior is not within that church anymore. My savior is within what I can find for myself, my own gods.
We had just had a whole conversation about why we keep talking about how the choice to pursue creative living is difficult, and we've just sort of outlined why that is, I think. So I'm glad that the universe is agreeing with us in the sense that this is not an easy thing to do. That seems to be the consensus here.
So then from there, as I feel like that's relatively clear cut for what it's meaning. Find your own gods, create your own gods. If that's art, that's art. If what you do right now genuinely does better your quality of life, then allow yourself to just feel content with the fact that you are doing something for yourself.
Allow is a big word.
Yeah.
Because it is that social conditioning that makes us not allow it. Yeah, and this I think we're specifically talking about when it comes to your passions. Because like if you just need to mow the lawn, you just need to mow the lawn. But this is more specific too.
Look, if you like mowing lawns,
mow lawns.
I've seen some pretty well-mowed lawns. That shit. Oh!
Speaking of sexual references.
I am not talking about that.
Pretty well-mowed lawns. You heard it here first. Cole appreciates a pretty...
I appreciate a well-mowed lawn. The right talking about blue hair and pronouns. Nah, I like well-mowed green lawns.
Well-mowed green lawns.
The King of Swords speaks to intellectual honesty. Putting knowledge into practice not for sake of self, but for sake of practice. And that may contradict what I just said, not using your intellectual weight to better your own situation. But if you are doing something you love, and you're doing something that actually betters your own mental well-being and your own spaces, we can admit that that's also somewhat selfishly driven.
Could this be pointing to the flip side of what the devil is potentially suggesting? This sort
it
of
very well could.
Okay.
I'd take the King of Swords and how you direct the greater energetic
So it's more
body.
of an individual responsibility towards betterment.
Yes. It is a commitment to what is true. In a lot of ways. Within your craft, if what you love is what you do, then you found your truth to some degree. But in speaking to how the devil and the Five of Pentacles reversed have shown toward turning away from systems that have failed and need to have their chain broken, the King of Swords looks directly at you and implores you to confront the truth, to confront what knowledge is within you that can be better placed elsewhere. So the Eight of Wands reversed, which was the groundhog of the deck.
The shadow.
The shadow of the deck, the card at the bottom, speaks greatly to what we talked about on the podcast today. To tie it into my analogy of like the treadmill, a thing that continues to move. The Eight of Wands speaks to continuity, especially when it's not what you necessarily wanted. Something never really truly finding its resolution, which we've had things like this in our readings for the podcast in the past. The fact that you must love the journey before the destination, or else you will burn yourself out.
Right.
One must accept that destination is a forever moving goalpost.
Very true.
And you do have to accept that to have that sort of endurance to reach that destination, it's not a matter of just jumping on the treadmill and running at the speed it is until you splat against the back wall. If you are going to even reach whatever goalpost is currently set for yourself, you have to do so with a mind on endurance, which is not productive. You cannot jump on this treadmill going 10 miles an hour and expect to run the distance you need to run to reach success all in one go, especially if you are jumping on the treadmill as it's fucking moving. Because it is moving. Be wary of how long you stay at a treadmill at any given time. Take care of yourself.
Yeah.
Do so effectively. Use what energy you have when you have it effectively, but do not feel like you have to be on that treadmill 24/7, because your best work will come when you actually feel that the best work is present to you.
Yeah, when you least expect it.
The architect's dilemma, as we talked about earlier on the podcast. Be a little impulsive. The rules are being rewritten now. We are showing that with the devil and the Five of Pentacles reversed, the systems of which we base our practicality, our our merits of self-worth are broken systems.
Agreed.
And they might right now still be what run things, and therefore it's what you have to consider.
Agreed.
But eventually they will fail. And it's showing its cracks. They're decrepit systems.
Mm-hmm.
Those systems are cracking in a very large
And you see
sense.
more and more people choosing not to participate.
In the present day, yeah. You have to confront what you need to be doing with yourself. First and foremost, because when those systems fail, when the door of the church closes and the door disappears entirely and it's a blank fucking wall, what are you going to look at then?
Yeah. You
need to look at what your own, to use the word again, you have to find your own gods.
Mm-hmm.
What drives you? What brings you fulfillment? What brings you self?
I like how the tarot is pointing us towards a new value system because the old value systems are not working for us anymore.
Yeah, at the end of the day, it's a value system is proposing. Exactly. How do you feel about that?
That was good. I think there's a lot to be taken from that tarot. I feel the same way I feel after a lot of tarot readings, which is that they are complex. They've got a lot of layers, and it takes me like at least a few hours, if not a few days, to like integrate this wisdom into how like my creative life is now.
Yeah.
So that's good. I wanted to close out.
Please do.
With a quote from you.
From a quote from me?
Yeah.
Oh,
Do you remember what your quote?
No, actually, I legitimately don't.
You forgot your quote. I'm so glad I wrote it down.
I'm actually surprised. Oh no, I absolutely would have forgotten.
I was like, I'm gonna write this down.
I remember me saying something. You say I'm gonna write that down. It's like, no, I'll remember. I didn't remember, so I'm very glad it was written.
Don't worry about doing enough. Worry about doing it consciously.
Ooh, I said that.
I think that's the whole point.
That is the whole point.
Regardless of what you choose, regardless of whether you're even interested in an artistic pursuit. If you worry about doing enough, it will cripple you.
It'll
burn you out. If you worry about doing it consciously, you'll only get more interested.
If you do so consciously as well, you become aware of like the ways of which you are conscious. If productivity is legitimately like some be-all end-all for some people, consider that being conscious will make you a more efficient person.
Absolutely.
So if you are someone who will dick ride productivity to the ends of the earth, consider that conscious action makes you a more productive person in all the ways that actually do matter in how the world is moving forward.
Don't worry about doing enough. Worry about doing it consciously. I want to take that home and sleep on it.
You are home.
I'm going to take that to that bed and sleep on it.
Pointing upright because the bed is currently above us. You found your own overbed.
I did. I never thought of it that way.
As a last snippet as we end the podcast, when we met each other, I didn't have the greatest of roommates.
Indeed.
And a lot of our classes required us to have a larger work surface, and the dorm we were in didn't have a great communal workspace. So I decided I'm going to take my Twin XL bed, I'm going to move the mattress down onto the floor.
Underneath the bed.
Underneath the bed frame.
So you can use the top of the bed as a desk.
Top of the bed. I got a piece of plywood from Home Depot, and I just put it on the top of the desk. It was my work surface.
Mm-hmm.
And under the bed, I created my own little sanctuary, so I can just, if I need to go into the room, I can go into my cave.
Underbed, we called it.
I didn't know I was autistic at the time. It seems so obvious now.
I actually copied Underbed our second year.
You did, yeah.
Because I was like, this is too good.
You took my piece of plywood.
I actually put curtains, I think you did too, all the way around the bed frame so that you could actually have privacy in a shared dorm space.
Yep. So good.
So good.
And now you have a loft.
So this is overbed.
So this is overbed, and your underbed is an entire kitchen.
Yes.
Plus
I do still share it with one person, and there is no privacy. Oh. That's what they call dating in New York. Choosing a roommate.
No, legitimately in New York, the dating scene is I need a roommate. I need to find someone that I'm not going to want to slit their throat in the middle of the night.
I had this conversation with a couple the other day. They've been dating for a couple years, and like, when are you moving in together? Not because you should move into someone you've been dating for only 2 years.
Like, seems like
it's just so reasonable.
It's the reasonable thing to. It's the logical thing to do.
In New York, you're like 2 people, 1 bedroom, split it. You can afford to live here suddenly.
So I think that's the podcast. I don't know how to end this podcast.
Well, you can just cut it off with the quote, because I think that is actually a super good place to cut it.
It's cool.
But if you want to keep in this banter, we'll also do a little dance right now. If you would like to support the podcast, we do have a Patreon, and there are different perks there and different things that we do to make that a special space and community. So maybe tap that link below.
Punch the microphone. Thank you for joining us.
We love you very much.